Hi, this is Rick Manning, President of Americans for Limited Government, here to give you a special live stream with Representative Andy Biggs. He's a Republican from Arizona. He represents District 5. He's former chairman of the Freedom Caucus, a group of conservative Republicans who philosophically stand up for freedom. They don't mess around. He's been a leader in conservative causes for years, and it's really a pleasure to have him on the air with us. We're going to talk today a little bit about federal personnel policy, and why this matters to you is today Joe Biden is declaring victory over COVID at his State of the Union address, and so it's really important today to hear this, because and I'm going to let Representative Biggs talk to you a little bit about some of the things that have been happening with the federal workforce in the last couple of years. Representative Biggs, welcome to the live stream. Appreciate you being on.
Rick, thanks for having me. Appreciate the work you guys do there to advocate for limited government. I mean, nothing could be more of a detriment to freedom than a massive government that encroaches on every aspect of your life. So I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to be with you.
Thank you very much. Most people, many people around the country don't know that Representative Biggs, before coming to Congress, was the state Senate president in Arizona. And so he has a lot of knowledge about what's happening at the state level in Arizona and the state laws, as well as the application of federal law. And that's a really important distinction, because he sees what he's been able to see two different systems and how they work or don't work, and can apply that. One of the things that struck my interest that I wanted to talk to you about was a piece of legislation which you have introduced. It's HR 6703. It's called the Return to Work Act. With the American workforce all returning to work, with the mask mandates all gone, you have a piece of legislation that will it's called the Return to Work Act. Tell me what it does and why it's important.
Yeah, so we put this together, and what it does is it says, if you're a federal agency, you have to go back to your pre-COVID telework policies. And the reason that that's important is because right now you've got a mess of federal employees who don't ever want to come back to work here in person. And I think of one particular agency that deals with veterans records. And so, and the reason that that's important is veterans are basically the way the VA is being run under Biden, they're not able to get out into the community and use these choices that we got under Trump. So they have to get their records. And right now there's I think the number is 550,000 case backlog. And the reason is because when the COVID stuff came down, you took people who worked in a filing office and you said, you guys work from home. Well, they can't get at the files. So they're working right now at a 25% capacity, and you've got veterans who need health care. They can't get the health care because the federal government is allowing these people to ostensibly work from home when they can't actually work from home.
Yeah, one of the ironies is we always hear about, we don't want to shut down the government. But what you've described is the government being shut down because of a personnel policy and a very powerful public employee union, which stands and says, no, we don't want to go back to work. So tell me, what's the effect of this in terms of, would those workers be required to go back to work right now? Is that the net effect that you would expect to have of this if this were to become law?
Yeah, we give them 60 days from the signing of that to go back, and that is critical because I know we're going to have to deal with unions and all that stuff, but you got to get some time to transition this thing, get it going again, and it's the Ian Parrish, who's a novelist, once said, "The ship of state is a massive ship that takes a long time to turn around." Well, we don't have a long time for a lot of these veterans or anybody else. We're just wanting to get back to work and doing what they're supposed to do. And you know, Rick, if they're not working, then there should be a reduction in force, and let's just move along.
Well, that's one of the opportunities, as I see it. We've had 2 years now of the federal workforce essentially being sidelined. We know that some are working from home. We know that some are pretending to work from home, and some aren't even pretending. And and so there's an opportunity from a management standpoint for the Office of Personnel Management to do an evaluation agency by agency to determine which employees have actually been doing their job and can be trusted to be in telework, and which ones, quite honestly, are doing nothing. And the challenge is that the Biden administration's Office of Personnel Management has put out guidance within the last 5 months, which pretty much opens the door for anybody to be able to telework, regardless of whether it's suitable. And your example with the file clerks, the people who are supposed to be keeping files and getting files and updating files at the Veterans Administration is a perfect example of people who are teleworking who can't telework because it's not the nature of their job.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, and so President Biden's going to say, look, was safe to go back to work, but then he's going to give a 9-week transition period to the Department of the Treasury, for instance. I mean, when you think about that, that's really problematic. I'll give you an analogy here. And what we've seen is, because you touched on this, is people, maybe they're working hard, maybe they're hardly working, maybe they're not even pretending to work. So Nancy Pelosi imposed on us a proxy voting scheme. And you were supposed to basically say that you were staying out because of COVID-related issues. We saw everything from people being on a boat and voting while on a boat on vacation as a member of Congress. And it's the nature of human beings that if you don't have to work hard and you still get paid the same amount of money, a lot of people are not going to work very hard. I mean, there are some people who are they're really ready, they're go-getters, they're going to keep working hard. But there's a lot of people who are going to abuse the system, take advantage of it. And I'm not a big advocate for big government, but I'll tell you what, this is a great time for us to do what you said, evaluate and reduce the size of federal government and state government where you can. Because if people think that they can stay at home and not do anything and still get paid, they'll do it.
Absolutely. I really, one of the things that I hope Congress will consider alongside the Return to Work Act is legislation to audit the federal workforce to try to determine whether or not, people, what they've been doing. Have they been working? Have they been even logging on to their computer? There's certain things that we can know. And if people haven't even been logging on to their computer, then why the heck are we paying them? And that's a very simple thing that we could find out. And, I think the integrity of the federal work system is really at stake here. For a long time, people have suspected that federal workers don't work very hard. I will tell you, when I was running Chief Staff Public Affairs Labor Department under George W. Bush, we had people who worked their tails off in there, and they were very reliable, and we counted on them, and they were great. They did exactly what civil servants were supposed to do. They supported the political arm and did their jobs, and they were phenomenally helpful. And there were others who basically were MIA, and there was little you could do about it. The opportunity we have right now is to try to determine, separate the wheat from the chaff. And if the government's been working just fine, and there's only been 60% of the people actually working, then this is a unique opportunity to determine which positions are not needed and to eliminate them and really streamline the government based upon what the actual determined needs are. So I think we've got a great opportunity with this, and the Return to Work Act is a really good starting point, because we're going to know which employees are saying, I'm not coming back. And that will be a self-determiner in many ways.
Yeah, and I like your idea of auditing and going back and saying, I mean, when there were some audits done of various school districts, I think of the LA County School District for one, you had students that had logged on the first time and then never logged on again. And who knows what became of those students. And I think that when you have a $30 trillion plus national debt, a structural deficit every year, one thing you can do to try to address that is to find out who's working and who's not working, and they need to be reduced. I mean, they need to be, as in England they would say, redundant. They're not necessary any longer. They should find work in the private sector.
Yeah, we have Yeah, that's the point. They would never find work in the private sector. But from a reduction in force is something that's been used throughout history to try to realign the federal workforce. And it does take an act of Congress. But I think one of the things we can do is in the remaining 3 years of the Biden administration, we need to be setting it up so we have the capacity on day one of the new administration in 2025. Set it up so we have the capacity to do a reduction in force, the political will and the knowledge to do that. We have to have an ability to pass legislation that will make it so our federal managers can get rid of employees who are lazy, incompetent, or recalcitrant and won't do their jobs. That's called the Merit Act. Very simple. It was actually done in the Veterans Administration in 2017 to correct the problems we saw in Phoenix and elsewhere, where veterans were just being left to die. That law comes from the Veterans Administration law that reforms that allowed those employees who were killing our veterans to be fired. So that's the exact same language applied across the board, for all agencies. Simple things that will make a huge difference in terms of our federal getting our arms around an unwieldy, out of control federal service. So I love the fact that you're talking about this. We've just put up a campaign to support the Return to Work Act. I'd encourage anybody who's watching to click the link that's on the screen right now and take action. Let Congress know that you want the Return to Work Act to get heard to this Congress and to be passed Congress. Tell me a little bit about we're prepping for the State of the Union address. We know the president is declaring victory on COVID. Do you find this a little ironic after the Democrats over the last 2 weeks have fought so hard in Congress to maintain the vaccine mandates? And yet now they're going to declare victory and say, we won, we did our job, and let's move forward. Don't you find that a little bit of dichotomy in those two things?
Yeah, I find it disingenuous, actually. I mean, Joe Biden said if 200,000 people died on your watch, you shouldn't be president of the United States. And then he's had 400,000 plus COVID deaths, twice as many as under President Trump. So I do find it ironic, but not surprising. I often say that nothing cures COVID quite like a midterm election when you're out of favor with the American public. And so that's what we're seeing today.
Yeah, one of the things some people are surprised that the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, has been so politically malleable. But we know that the whole reason we had mask mandates in schools and we had various requirements for kids to get vaccines and the like was directly a result of teacher union lobbying. And so it's not surprising that the polling is terrible for the Democrats. We've got polling memos from various Democrat pollsters saying, declare victory, get out of this. We got to get a way out. And so the State of the Union will miraculously be the end of the COVID pandemic. And suddenly Joe Biden's going to sound like Donald Trump 15 months ago. So
yeah, I think that's right. And the thing of this is, I mean, we know the influence the teachers union has because the National School Board Association, for instance, wrote a letter at the instances of the Biden administration regarding parents and school board meetings. So there's a tremendous amount of influence from teachers unions and actually from all unions on this administration. So like I say, I'm not surprised that this is happening. I am not disillusioned because I come into this, Rick, fairly disillusioned, but I think it is something that Americans should be aware of, that the unions in some ways have captured even the health public health bureaucracy in Washington, D.C., which gets to the finer point of what we were talking about earlier is some of these need to go away and limit the size and scope of government. Because I can tell you right now, most states could have handled, quite frankly, the COVID issue in their own states with their own policymakers their own medical care bureaucracy at the state level, and they would have done a better job than the federal level ever did.
There's no doubt about that. Albert Brown comments, if there was any doubt, if it was about politics and not science, here's the proof. And I think, how do you think Republicans are going to react to this, to the Biden announcement that the pandemic is over and, we won, and he's going to try to take a victory lap on what has been an abject failure policy for the entirety of his administration on this? But how will Republicans respond to that? What do you expect to hear? What are you going to say tonight when somebody sticks a microphone in front of your face and talks about the great job Biden's done on COVID?
Well, I will give them two examples of the fraudulent statement. Number one is that we were required to have masks on our faces on the floor until yesterday. And even today, they're trying to make sure that you have a negative COVID test and all kinds of other ramifications before you get on the floor. And around the house here, around the Capitol complex, you can tell who works in a Democrat office and who works in a Republican office, because Republican offices for months have been without masks. Democrat offices have had masks. And then I would say if the distinction is as plain on your face if you go to a red state or a blue state. If you're in a red state, they've been without masks for a long time. If you're in a blue state like California, they're wearing 2 and 3 masks at a time. And so it is all about, Albert's right, it is about politics. I would add about control and not science.
Yeah, I think that's right. One of the things I think we all know is, certainly people in Arizona know, 3 years ago, somebody shows up in your bank and they're wearing a mask. They're the bad guy. I think you can apply the same thing right now in terms of what's happened on Capitol Hill last couple of years. But it's so I'm going to finish with this one question, because I think this is really important. There's a lot of regulations and other things, executive orders that President Biden put in place related to vaccine mandates that impact people's ability to do work in the military, people who are government contractors, civil servants, and people who are healthcare workers. They all are sitting there with a vaccine mandate, with people losing their job or in jeopardy of losing their job still. That is like Damocles' sword hanging over their head if it hasn't already been swung. Vaccine mandates. The government has admitted the problem's over, so there's no need to keep them around. It's kind of lingering ability to coerce people into action. What do you think the opportunity is? We've got our omnibus bill that's going to be decided on by March 11th. Is there a move in terms of the House to start demanding, and House Republicans in particular, start demanding that any negotiators on the omnibus just defund all the vaccine mandates, all the mask mandates once and for all, so they don't sit there as lingering regulations that bureaucrats can use against people who they selectively don't like?
Well, Rick, just a couple of weeks ago when we passed another short-term spending bill, that was one of the demands that we in the House Freedom Caucus made on leadership on both on our party and on the other side. We tried to make the same demand on other must-pass legislation as well. And I think the time is right. It's long overdue. Let's just be honest. This is long overdue. You can't be a hero medical care worker before the vaccines are initiated, and you're running all the risk and getting sick yourself. Some died even. And then when you don't want to take the vaccine, now you're a pariah in healthcare and in America. That is one of the unfortunate political consequences of the Biden administration and their vax mandates. So we're going to, we did in February. We'll do it again in March. And quite frankly, President Biden has exceeded his presidential authority, not just there, but in the Mexico City policy, border issues, all along the case. And we have to keep fighting those every step of the way.
That certainly is appreciated, Representative Biggs. And I will tell you, we are focused like a laser beam on getting these defunded in this March 11th omnibus. It really is the last chance to get that done. And anything that you guys can do to push that into into Kevin McCarthy's consciousness would certainly be great, because the fact of the matter is there's no reason for them to still exist. And there's nothing worse than lingering regulations that can be used later on for other things, which have no efficacy now. They need to go away. And this would be a great opportunity for Congress to reassert your Article 1 authority and tell the Biden administration, no, we really don't like it that you reach into people's personnel HR offices and say, you're going to be fired, this person, this person, and this person, because we don't like the health care they're receiving. I mean, it's just so absurd that they were allowed to do it. And I think it's important for Article 1, constitutional, your power of the purse, to assert that. And even if it's just cleaning up a mess, to assert it now so people get kind of flex that muscle and get that muscle used to be used, because we need to start asserting that power of the purse a lot in the next couple of years.
Amen to that. We need to reassert our Article 1 powers, but I guarantee you, for House Freedom Caucus and will push on the elimination of vax mandates in any spending bill going forward. And I know that there's a lot of my colleagues outside the Freedom Caucus who feel the same way.
Thank you, Representative Biggs. How do people follow you on Facebook or on Twitter or however you want to be followed? Getter, whatever it is.
Yeah, I'll give you a whole bunch of stuff. You can find us at Twitter at Rep Andy Biggs AZ, on Instagram at Rep Andy Biggs, on Facebook Congressman Andy Biggs, on Truth Social at Rep Andy Biggs AZ. I'm also on Rumble and every truly free market social media site as well.
Well, Americans for Limited Government follows you, and I would encourage everybody else to follow you. Andy Biggs is one of the real leaders in Congress. He's been, as chairman of the Freedom Caucus, he's been at the forefront of a lot of the fights that we've seen over the last couple of years. And while people around the country may not be as familiar with you as others like Jim Jordan, I want to tell people, this guy, the guy we've got on the screen right here, he has been a stud for freedom. And we follow him. He's a great follow. He's a great leader. And Representative Biggs, we just appreciate your time today. And thank you very much for all you're doing.
Thanks, Rick. Great to be with you. You guys keep up the fight, and we'll fight together. We'll win this thing.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
And that's Representative Andy Biggs. He's, like I say, a great leader from Arizona. He's only been in Congress since 2017, but he's one of those guys who stands up and just fights like crazy for the beliefs that he was actually sent here to fight for. He hasn't forgotten what the people of Arizona sent him to do, and he is a guy who we can all be proud that he has taken this role so seriously and has been a congressman that the people of Arizona can be proud of, and a lot of the other representatives should aspire to be like. Thank you very much for your time. This has been Americans for Limited Government live stream, and we hope that you'll join us again tomorrow when we talk about the State of the Union address and what Joe Biden said, what he didn't say, and where he might not have been too coherent in whatever he said. So we will talk to you tomorrow, probably around 4:00, about the Biden State of the Union address. Till then, take care.